Welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today in the show, we have Traci Powell. She is a nurse practitioner and she wrote the Kevin MD article, "If you're a nurse or an abuse survivor, you don't have to be brave." Traci, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and journey to where you are today?
Sure. I've been a nurse for about 29 years. The first 8 years of my career, I was in adult nursing. Then I transitioned into NICU. I was a NICU staff nurse for a while, charge nurse. And then I became a neonatal nurse practitioner once I moved from New Jersey to Florida. And in the middle of my NMP career, I had kind of what I call my midlife meltdown, which wasn't a midlife crisis. It was the fact that I had a lot of child abuse happen to me that I tried to pretend for many years didn't happen. And during that time at all, I had really bad PTSD and it really started to affect me and ultimately almost ended with me ending my life. And so that really kind of forced me to start to get help that I was afraid to seek out because I was a nurse practitioner at that time and I was afraid that people would think bad things about me or think I wasn't competent. And so as I moved through that healing process, I became aware of other professionals, especially nurse practitioners, doctors who also had their stories that they hadn't shared. And through hearing my story, they were starting to share. And I ultimately met a nurse who, through hearing my story, told me that she had a suicide plan 2 nights later. And, I got her the help that she needed. The woman is amazing now. And it really woke me up to the fact that I, can't be quiet about this anymore. There are people struggling in silence because we're afraid to reach out for help, especially in these kind of roles. And so now I work towards helping professionals who are overcoming, especially child abuse, which it turns out there are a lot of medical professionals and nurses who are in that group because we give away the care that we wish that we had had. And so I went back, I got my psych mental health nurse practitioner, having a private practice now where I work primarily with professionals. And I also started a group called Nurses Healing Nurses to help nurses who are really struggling now with the way things are going in healthcare.
So you mentioned in your story that as a nurse practitioner, that prevented you from getting the help that you need. So
Right.
Can you paint us a picture and tell us a story about a little bit more detail about why was it so difficult as a nurse practitioner to get the behavioral health help that you need during these low times?
Well, there are several reasons. One, I would hear nurses and other people who would took FMLA for mental health reasons, and you would see people on Facebook looking at their pages and being like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with that person," and kind of making fun of that. There are boxes as practitioners and as physicians that we have to check that say, I have no mental health issues that will impact my job. And, it's funny, I get references for other practitioners and it will say, are you aware of any mental health issues that this person has? And who am I to decide for someone else whether or not their mental health affects their job? So that's very intimidating. It makes you think I can't admit. And then I actually broke my leg around this time and I got a text from one of my bosses that said, I don't care if you're crawling, you better be back at work. So if I can't break my leg and take time off, how am I supposed to say I'm really struggling mentally and I need time off? So it was all those things. And then it was just the stigma of all of it that here I was, this nurse practitioner that people looked up to. And how was I going to say that I was really struggling with anxiety and depression? And, sadly at the time, it seemed like the best answer was let's just end it rather than admit to everyone what's going on with me.
So a few years has passed since you got that help. What's
Yes.
the situation now when it comes to behavioral health help for professionals compared to back then?
I definitely think there's more awareness related to it. I would like to say the stigma is a little bit better, but I think there are still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I know of 3 colleagues who have died of suicide in the last several years. And they were all people that we all said, what? And we were shocked that it happened. And I think as long as that box is there that you have to check that says, does this person have a mental health issue? It still contributes to the fear of, can I reach out? And so there are more of us now speaking up, which I think is helping. I have the group where nurses are able to come in and speak freely about what they're struggling with. But I think we have a long way to go as well.
You talk more about this in your Kevin MD article, and it's titled, "If you're a nurse or an abuse survivor, you don't have to be brave." Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read your article, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
Sure. It came from really my own experience of, I was called brave most of my life. I had 2 kids that I raised by myself. I was brave for that. I was brave for going back to school and getting my master's degree. I was brave for buying my house. I was brave for moving to Florida. But really, all of that braveness was me just trying to show the world that I was okay. I was fine and I could muscle through. And through, especially Nurses Healing Nurses and my own practice, I have so many nurses and medical professionals that reach out to me that feel like they need to show that fine face and be brave and muscle through. And then on top of that, they put the superhero cape on us. And then there's this whole public persona of, oh, you're a superhero, so you've got to be brave. And really what kind of put me over the edge recently was in one of the groups, a PTSD group that I participate in, there was a nurse in there who was contemplating, should I leave the field because she's so burned out from what's going on with the COVID unit that she worked in. And a lady responded who was not a nurse and basically said, if you're not brave enough to do the job and you don't care, then you shouldn't be there. And so, I wanted to strip away brave because I think we are all kind of fed the lie that we have to be brave and we have to suck it up and we have to be okay. But courage, on the other hand, allows us to step into our fears. It allows us to be more open with each other and share and be more vulnerable so that we can be on a human level because we're all going through this together. And so rather than shaming each other out of those feelings that we have, supporting each other and taking a little bit of courage into stepping into what is right for us. And right now, for a lot of people, that courage includes leaving the role that you're in or the job that you're in. Because I just literally before I got on this call, I had a call from a practitioner who is really struggling in her job. And she's like, I need to get out of here. And she gave me this litany of reasons why she has to stay, none of which benefited her. So it's brave for her to stay and do what they need, but to step into her courage is to take her fear with her and realize that she's unbelievably smart and has so many opportunities if she would just step into that.
So you mentioned calling nurses and other healthcare professionals superheroes puts an added burden or stress on them.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, again, it goes back to that concept of if you're a superhero, if you think about Superman when he's flying around in the sky, right? If he sees a bank robbery down below, he flies out, he takes care of the bank robbery and he goes back and nobody worries about how he feels. So when you put that superhero cape on someone, it creates this whole public dissociation against what that person is experiencing. Because if you're superhero and strong, then you must not be vulnerable. You must not have feelings. And it's much easier for someone to put someone in that category. And so people aren't having to acknowledge what is that person actually going through and allowing them to be human in the work that they're doing. And, especially through COVID, so many people have had to be shamed and told to suck it up. And I will never get the picture of the nurses with the trash bag that they were wearing out of my mind. Like, how do you do that to a person and you call them a superhero because be a superhero. Here's your cape. It's a trash bag. It just kind of really disconnects the way that we see people as human beings.
Now, you talked, of course, to a lot of nurses and nurse practitioners during this difficult time, and there's a tremendous amount of pressure on them from their administrators. Like you said, that all the floors are short-staffed, and there's a lot of pressure on them to do more with fewer resources. Now, in this environment, what are some specific ways that they can show courage and be more vulnerable?
I think most importantly, they need to be connecting with one another because this is a common experience everyone is having. And when COVID wasn't happening when I was going through my stuff and I kept it to myself. And when I gradually started telling my story, I kid you not, when I tell you every single time I have 1 or 2 people come to me and say, me too, this happened to me, this is how I'm feeling. So what we think we're holding to ourselves, many other people are experiencing. And so we can become more human even with each other and start to connect, and we can support each other through, which is part of why I started Nurses Healing Nurses, so that nurses can, instead of eat their young, as they used to say, we come together and support each other through this. Because sadly, I don't know what the answer is to leadership, but that's where a lot of the problems come from. And it's people who don't know what it's like to be in the shoes of the person who's walking those halls every day and dealing with the stress. And so a lot of it is connection, and part of it is really contemplating if you're in a situation where it is so stressful that you don't know that you can survive this, knowing that you're not stuck. It might feel like you're stuck because our brains want us to stay where things are familiar, And so even if familiar is uncomfortable, sometimes we stay. And we have all these reasons why, well, I've been here for 10 years. I have a pension, all these things. But if your life is miserable, dare to step into your courage and the fear of leaving and see what other opportunities are out there. Because in this field, there's so much that you can do.
So give some examples of that, because that story of the nurse that you just told, where the administrator told her all these reasons why she should stay, but none of those reasons really benefited her. What are some of the other options that nurses can look to when they're pressured by administrators and perhaps thinking about leaving?
Well, we know, nurses are needed everywhere right now. So there's always other hospitals that you can look into. There's travel nursing. There is nurse coaching is very popular right now. Nurses are starting their own businesses. There's educating. And I started my own business. I would have never in a million years, 3 years ago, thought I would be my own boss. And it's been unbelievably freeing. But 3 years ago, I was in such a toxic environment that I thought it was impossible that life would ever get better. So get out on the internet, look at the different jobs that are out there, start researching what nurses and even doctors. I have several doctor friends that have broken free of a hospital and they've started their own thing. But there's so many jobs right now that you're not stuck where you are.
Sometimes it's so hard to let go. I talk to a lot of physicians, and even though that situation is toxic to them, it's so hard to kind of let go of the familiar and jump into something that's new and even entrepreneurial. So perhaps you could share a success story. Like what are some of the things that you coach nurses do to try to let go of that toxic environment and to jump into something that is completely foreign or maybe unknown to them? So what are some ways that you coach them through that?
Primarily, it's helping them find their own authentic selves. Because once they get back to, why did I go into nursing to begin with? Like, I really work with people, whether they're a nurse or an abuse survivor, getting back to their light. Like, we all came into this world pure and innocent with this light in us that guided the way. And somewhere along the line, some darkness came along and shadows covered our light, but the light is still there. So as nurses, I don't think everybody's done this, but when I went into nursing, we actually had a Florence Nightingale candle that we would lit, and there was our light for nursing. And so we'll go back into talking about what made you want to do this to begin with. Where was your heart in this? And how do we help you find that again? And what feels authentic to you? And sometimes it takes a lot of work to help people really overcome that. But this is the thing I know. It's the devil I know, right? I'm comfortable in this place. And it's really scary to step into what could be a good life. And that's part of the courage too, is embracing that fear of, I'm going to try this new thing. And sometimes it's transition. So stay in the old job, maybe cut back your hours as you're trying the new thing, so you can feel a little safe and have a little bridge until you're able to fully step into the new thing. And if the new thing isn't what's working, then there's another new thing that you can do.
We're talking to Traci Powell. She's a nurse practitioner, and she wrote the Kevin MD article, "If you're a nurse or an abuse survivor, you don't have to be brave." Traci, as we enter another winter of the pandemic, a lot of nurses, again, like you said, are under a tremendous amount of stress. You had trouble at your lowest time to reach out for behavioral health help. What kind of advice can you share to these nurses who are going under tremendous mental and emotional stress, but are too afraid to look for help?
I would just say, please, please, please reach out. Whether, I know some people are afraid to use their EAPs because it's connected to their hospital. There are therapists all over the place that are there to help you. And it's totally confidential. Unless you're threatening to hurt yourself or someone else, it's all confidential. Put yourself first, because if we don't put ourselves first and take care of ourselves, we're not doing a good job for our patients, at least not as good as we could be. And so if you're struggling, you can email me, reach out to me. Nurses Healing Nurses is there. And there are therapists all over the place that are anxious to help nurses. And I'm actually trying to get a list of nurse practitioners. So we really are all nurses helping nurses. But the main thing is to reach out.
And my final question, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
Well, the biggest thing is, kind of what we talked about, is you're not stuck. We give ourselves these conversations in our own head that says, I can't get out of here. I have to deal with the burden of this. And just try to figure out ways to help you out of this. And if you want to stay where you are, then there are things that you can do. Like today, I just put on Nurses Healing Nurses. Research has come out and shown how 2 weeks straight of 10 minutes of happy music a day can help to lift your mood. Spending time with pets, doing things outside of work that will help to increase your mood so that as you go back to work, your tolerance level is a little bit higher than it would be. because right now a lot of people are taking all that stress home to their families as well. So just trying to disengage from work when you get home. They can reach me, Traci, at tracipowell.com. Nurses Healing Nurses is a Facebook group. You can search that. That's on there, and we'll take all the nurses who want to join. And there's, the two main ways. Or my Facebook page is called The Rebuilt Woman.
Traci, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.